The crisp morning air bit at my exposed skin, but I barely registered the chill. My focus was entirely on the massive, colorful orb slowly inflating before me. This was it. My escape. My meticulously planned solo hot air balloon ride, a sanctuary I had paid a small fortune for, designed to offer an hour of blissful, uninterrupted solitude above the bustling world. It was my kind of adventure, grand in scale, yet private in execution. I clutched my printed confirmation, its edges already soft from nervous handling, and approached the small, makeshift counter. A harried-looking attendant, whose name tag read Gary, barely met my eyes. "Virginia Hayes," he grunted, scanning a clipboard. "Yes, that's me." I managed, my voice a little tighter than I would have liked. He tapped a pen against a line. "Looks like we have a problem here, Miss Hayes. Your solo booking, it appears to have been misplaced. A system error, you understand." My stomach dropped, a cold, sickening lurch. "Misplaced," I repeated, my carefully constructed calm beginning to fray. "But I confirmed it last week. Twice." Gary, oblivious to my internal crumbling, shrugged. "Unfortunately, we're fully booked today. The only option is to pair you with another passenger, unless you'd like to reschedule." His tone suggested rescheduling was the only sensible choice, a gentle dismissal of my very real distress. Reschedule? The thought was unbearable. My meticulously planned itinerary, my fragile courage to even attempt this, all for naught? The anger, a hot, unfamiliar surge, began to prickle beneath my skin. How could they simply lose my reservation? My solo reservation? But the words caught in my throat, tangled with the fear of making a scene, of drawing attention to myself. I hated confrontation. Absolutely detested it. My cheeks were already warm, a telltale sign of my internal turmoil. "No," I finally croaked, the word barely audible. I'll go now." Gary nodded, already moving on to the next person in line, the matter in his eyes closed. He gestured towards the basket where a small group was already gathering. "She'll be joining you then. Just wait for the final boarding call." My shoulders slumped. This was my worst nightmare come to life. Forced interaction, an unexpected companion, all my carefully built walls suddenly under siege. I watched, a knot forming in my chest, as the ground crew made their final preparations. The enormous balloon, a patchwork of fiery reds and deep blues, swayed gently, tethered to the ground. It looked majestic, inviting, yet now it felt like a trap. A voice, bright and unapologetically cheerful, cut through my anxious thoughts. "Well, this is exciting, isn't it?" I flinched, turning slowly. Standing beside me, a little too close for comfort, was a woman. She looked around my age, maybe a year or two older. Her hair, a cascade of rich, dark curls, framed a face that was all sharp angles and captivating warmth. Her eyes, a startling shade of hazel, sparkled with an almost childlike enthusiasm. She had a scattering of freckles across the bridge of her nose and a smile that seemed to reach them. She wore a fitted denim jacket over a simple cream-colored sweater, the kind of effortlessly chic look I could only dream of pulling off. She radiated an easy confidence that made me feel even more awkward and small. "Oh," I managed, my voice barely a whisper. My cheeks, already flushed from indignation, now burned with fresh embarrassment. "You must be the other passenger," she declared, extending a hand. Her grip was firm, surprisingly warm. "I'm Ruth. Ruth Miller. So sorry about the mix-up, but honestly, more the merrier, right?" "Virginia," I mumbled, barely squeezing her hand before quickly retracting mine. "Virginia Hayes." The more the merrier comment felt like a direct jab at my entire life philosophy. "Virginia," Ruth repeated, her smile softening. "That's a lovely name." She didn't seem to notice my stiff posture, my avoidance of eye contact. Instead, her gaze swept over the expanding balloon, a genuine sense of wonder in her expression. "Can you believe we get to do this? It's been on my bucket list forever." I mumbled something incoherent about it being my first time. The truth was, my bucket list consisted mostly of places to visit alone, far from people like Ruth. Her energy was almost overwhelming. I wished I could just disappear into the fabric of the balloon itself. First time? Oh, you're in for a treat. The views are supposed to be incredible. She glanced at me, and for a moment, her bright gaze seemed to soften, her enthusiasm toning down just a notch. You seem a little quiet. Not a morning person? She asked, a gentle amusement in her tone, not judgment. Just excited. I lied, my voice cracking slightly. My face felt impossibly hot. I could feel the blush creeping down my neck, a telltale sign of my discomfort. Ruth chuckled, a low, pleasant sound. She didn't press. Instead, she turned her attention back to the balloon, a thoughtful expression on her face. It's truly breathtaking, isn't it? All that vibrant color against the pale sky. We boarded the basket a few minutes later, the crew guiding us in. It was surprisingly spacious, but not so much that you didn't feel the presence of your fellow passengers. I positioned myself as far away from Ruth as possible, clutching the wicker edge with a white-knuckled grip. The air filled with the roaring whoosh of the burner, a powerful blast of heat that briefly made me flinch. Then, a gentle lurch, a slow, almost imperceptible liftoff. The world began to shrink beneath us. Houses turned into toy blocks, cars into crawling insects. The patchwork field stretched out like a colossal quilt. The silence in the basket, broken only by the occasional roar of the burner and the soft creaking of the wicker, was profound. It was exactly the kind of breathtaking, isolated beauty I had craved. Except now Ruth was there. She stood a few feet away, her head tilted back slightly, her eyes wide with a quiet awe. Her dark curls ruffled gently in the breeze. She wasn't chattering now, just observing, soaking it all in. I risked a glance at her, and for the first time, I noticed a thoughtful, almost serene expression on her face. The bright, effervescent energy had receded, replaced by a quiet appreciation. It was a side of her I hadn't expected. It's beautiful, she whispered, almost to herself, her voice soft against the vastness of the sky. I found myself nodding, a small, involuntary movement. My throat felt thick, but a strange sense of calm began to settle over me. The expansive views, the quiet ascent, the sheer impossibility of it all, it was, indeed, beautiful. And for a brief, unexpected moment, sharing that quiet awe with Ruth didn't feel like a burden. It felt, strangely, like a shared secret, suspended between earth and sky. The memory of the hot air balloon ride lingered, a surprisingly pleasant aftertaste to an otherwise exasperating morning. The sheer majesty of floating above the world had, for a time, made me forget my initial irritation at Ruth's presence. Still, once our feet were back on solid ground, I'd offered a quick, mumbled goodbye and practically bolted, eager to regain my precious solitude. Hours later, the sun was high, casting long shadows as I wandered into a small, independent boutique. It was the kind of place I loved, filled with unique, handcrafted items, the air fragrant with essential oils and aged wood. Here, I could lose myself in the details, examine every trinket and textile without the pressure of social interaction. I picked up a delicate silver pendant, turning it over in my fingers, admiring the intricate filigree. Then I saw her. Across the room, by a display of vibrant scarves, stood Ruth. Her back was to me, but there was no mistaking the cascade of dark curls, the way she animatedly gestured with one hand as she spoke to the shop owner. My heart gave a strange, unexpected lurch. A flicker of surprise, yes, but also a peculiar sense of recognition, like seeing a familiar landmark in an unfamiliar city. I quickly turned my back, feigning intense interest in a shelf of ceramic mugs, hoping she wouldn't notice me. My face, of course, chose that exact moment to ignite with a fresh blush. Virginia, her voice, warm and unmistakable, was right behind me. I slowly turned, a forced, tight-lipped smile plastered on my face. Oh, Ruth. What a coincidence. My voice sounded stiff, unnatural. She chuckled, a genuine, easy sound. It really is. This place is great, isn't it? I love their jewelry. You have excellent taste. She gestured towards the pendant still clutched in my hand. Are you looking for anything in particular? Just browsing, I mumbled, putting the pendant back down. I felt caught, like a deer in headlights. My carefully constructed day of solitary exploration was once again interrupted. Yet, a part of me, a tiny, unfamiliar part, felt a strange pull towards her effortless warmth. Me too, she said, undeterred by my awkwardness. I was just thinking of grabbing some coffee. Or maybe lunch. There's a charming little cafe down the street with amazing sandwiches. Interested? Her hazel eyes sparkled, open and inviting. My mind raced, searching for an excuse, any excuse. But my tongue felt heavy, tied in knots. The words wouldn't come. Besides, her offer was so genuinely friendly, so devoid of expectation. Rejecting it felt almost rude. And truth be told, a small, curious part of me was intrigued. What would it be like to spend more time with someone so utterly different from myself? Okay, I heard myself say, the words slipping out before I could second-guess it. Ruth's smile widened, lighting up her face. Great. Lead the way, or I can. I just passed it. We walked side by side, a comfortable silence falling between us as we navigated the bustling street. The cafe was indeed charming, filled with the aroma of freshly ground coffee and baking bread. We found a small, sun-drenched table by the window. Over lunch, a surprisingly delicious caprese sandwich that Ruth had insisted I try. The conversation flowed more easily than I expected. Ruth talked about her work as a freelance graphic designer, her passion for obscure indie films, and her latest travel plans. She was an open book, effortlessly sharing pieces of her life. I, in turn, found myself offering small, carefully selected details about my own. I confess my love for historical fiction, my habit of getting lost in ancient cityscapes, my penchant for quiet museums. You have such a vivid imagination, Ruth observed, taking a sip of her latte. I can practically see the dusty old books and the crumbling ruins you're describing. She leaned forward slightly, her gaze unwavering, genuinely interested. What draws you to those places? I hesitated, searching for the right words. I suppose they feel timeless, like stepping into a story. And they don't demand anything from you, just observation. I felt a warmth spread through me, a faint flush, as I realized I was revealing more of myself than usual. Ruth nodded slowly. I get that. It's like they hold a history that's bigger than any one person. A quiet kind of power. She seemed to understand, truly understand, without me having to explain further. It was a rare and disarming feeling. The afternoon passed quickly. After lunch, we found ourselves drawn back to the shops, this time exploring a small gallery filled with local art. We exchanged thoughts on brushstrokes and color palettes, discovering a surprising commonality in our appreciation for certain abstract pieces. Ruth's infectious enthusiasm made even my guarded observations feel lighter, more articulate. I found myself laughing, a genuine, unrestrained sound that surprised even myself, at one of her witty remarks about a particularly flamboyant sculpture. As the sun began to dip towards the horizon, casting the streets in a golden glow, we found ourselves outside a small bookstore. I should probably head back, I said, a faint pang of disappointment surprising me. Me too, Ruth agreed, though her smile held a hint of reluctance. But this was really lovely, Virginia. Much better than staring at my phone alone. Her gaze lingered on mine for a moment, warm and direct. I'm glad your booking got misplaced. My cheeks flushed again, but this time, it wasn't purely embarrassment. There was a lightness to it, a strange, burgeoning warmth. Me too, I whispered, and this time, it was the truth. As we parted ways, exchanging a casual wave, I felt a peculiar sense of something new blooming within me, an unfamiliar openness that had started with an unwelcome companion and was slowly, steadily, transforming into a budding friendship. The next few days of my trip felt different. The solitude I usually cherished now carried a faint echo of Ruth's laughter, a lingering warmth from our shared conversations. I still explored the city's ancient ruins and quiet museums alone, but the mental space I typically reserved for introspection was occasionally punctuated by thoughts of her, by wondering what she was seeing, what she was doing. It was unsettling, this subtle shift, yet not entirely unwelcome. The morning of my flight home arrived with a familiar sense of melancholic peace. I always enjoyed the transition back, the quiet contemplation of a journey's end. I arrived at the airport with plenty of time, checked my single, modest suitcase, and made my way through security. My gate was relatively quiet, a scattering of weary travelers absorbed in their phones or books. I pulled out my own paperback, a historical novel, and settled into a window seat, ready to retreat into its pages. A few minutes later, a voice, unmistakably cheerful even amidst the airport's muted hum, broke through my concentration. "Well, look who it is." My head snapped up. Standing a few feet away, a small carry-on slung over her shoulder, was Ruth. Her hazel eyes were wide with surprise, mirroring my own. Her dark curls were pulled back in a loose bun, a few tendrils escaping to frame her face. She wore a comfortable-looking travel outfit, leggings and an oversized sweater, but even in casual clothes, she exuded an effortless vibrancy. "Ruth," I managed, my voice thin with disbelief. What are you doing here?" She laughed, a bright, clear sound that drew a few curious glances. "I'm going home, Virginia. What about you?" "Don't tell me." She glanced down at her boarding pass, then back at me, a wide grin spreading across her face. "No way. Seriously?" I fumbled for my own boarding pass, my fingers trembling slightly. My eyes scanned the details. Gate B17, Flight 204. I looked up at Ruth, who was holding her pass for me to see. Gate B17, Flight 204. "No way," I whispered, the words barely escaping my lips. A genuine laugh, light and disbelieving, bubbled up from deep inside me. "This is impossible." Ruth threw her head back, a joyous peal of laughter filling the air. "Impossible and incredible. It's fate, Virginia, I'm telling you." She looked truly delighted, her entire being radiating an infectious joy. We found seats together on the plane, 2 rows back from the wing. The initial shock slowly wore off, replaced by a comfortable familiarity. The journey, usually a time of quiet reflection for me, became a delightful blur of conversation. We talked about everything and nothing, our favorite movies, childhood memories, the silliest things we'd ever done. Ruth was a captivating storyteller, her words painting vivid pictures that made me laugh aloud more than once. And I talked. More than I usually did, certainly more than I had planned. Emboldened by the contained space, the feeling of being suspended between two places, I found myself revealing small, carefully chosen fragments of my life. I spoke about my passion for photography, a hobby I rarely shared, explaining how I saw beauty in the quiet corners of the world. I even hinted at the restlessness that often drove my solo travels, a vague sense of searching for something undefined. Ruth listened with an unwavering intensity, her gaze warm and direct, occasionally offering a thoughtful nod or a gentle question that made me feel truly seen. She didn't interrupt, didn't judge. Her presence felt like a soft invitation, an unspoken promise of understanding that allowed me to drop my guard just a fraction. "You have such a peaceful way of looking at things, Virginia," she said quietly at one point, as I described the serene quality of a particular ancient ruin. "Like you see the soul of a place." Her voice was soft, laced with a genuine admiration that sent a faint flush through me. "And you bring everything to life," I replied, a little breathless. Her vibrant energy was a stark contrast to my own quiet intensity, yet it felt strangely complementary. As the plane began its descent, the familiar landscape of our shared city unfolding beneath us, a new realization dawned. This wasn't just a chance encounter, it was a repeated, undeniable thread woven into the fabric of my life. The universe, it seemed, wasn't just offering a coincidence, it was orchestrating a connection. And for the first time in a very long time, the thought of returning home didn't feel like returning to solitude. It felt like returning to possibility. As we gathered our things, a shared smile passed between us, a silent acknowledgement that this was not goodbye, but merely a pause before a new beginning. Weeks dissolved into a month, then another, a comfortable rhythm establishing itself between Ruth and me. Our coincidence at the airport had indeed blossomed into a steady presence in my life. We fell into a pattern of frequent meetups, coffee on Tuesday mornings, exploring new art galleries on Saturday afternoons, impromptu dinners that stretched late into the evening. My world, once a carefully curated landscape of solitary pursuits, now felt brighter, punctuated by Ruth's vibrant energy. I found myself looking forward to our time together with an eagerness that was both exhilarating and a little unsettling. The thought of an empty Saturday, once a source of quiet contentment, now carried a faint whisper of disappointment if it didn't include Ruth. I'd catch myself smiling at something mundane, only to realize I was anticipating telling her about it later. This growing attachment was foreign, unsettling, yet undeniably warm. It started subtly, these shifts. A fleeting touch on my arm as she laughed at one of my rare jokes, a hand brushing mine when we reached for the same pastry. Each contact, however innocent, sent a peculiar tremor through me, a shiver that had nothing to do with the temperature. My cheeks, ever the betrayers, would bloom with a faint blush, a heat I tried desperately to hide. I'd pretend to be absorbed in a menu, or adjust my scarf, anything to avoid her gaze and the risk of her noticing my sudden discomposure. Ruth, with her effortless charm, seemed to sense these shifts, though she never explicitly acknowledged them. Her smiles became a little softer when she looked at me, her gaze a touch more lingering. She'd lean a little closer when she spoke, her voice dropping to a warm, intimate murmur that seemed meant just for my ears. Sometimes, her fingers would brush the stray strands of hair from my face, a gesture so gentle and unexpected it would steal my breath. One evening, we were at a small, dimly lit jazz club, a place Ruth loved for its soulful, improvisational music. The saxophone wailed a mournful, beautiful melody, creating an atmosphere thick with unspoken emotions. We were sharing a small table, our knees occasionally brushing beneath it. Ruth, her face illuminated by the soft glow of a nearby lamp, was talking animatedly about a new artist she discovered, her hands moving gracefully as she described the brushstrokes. "You have such a beautiful way of seeing things, Virginia," she murmured, her voice a low, husky whisper that seemed to cut through the music. Her hazel eyes, usually so bright and open, were now shadowed, intense, focused entirely on me. "It's like you see the hidden beauty, the soul of everything." Her gaze, which had been on my eyes, slowly, deliberately, dropped to my mouth, lingering there for a beat that felt like an eternity. My heart gave a frantic, almost painful thump against my ribs. The air around us, already thick with the sultry jazz music, suddenly crackled with an unspoken tension, an electric current that made every nerve ending hum. My breath caught in my throat, a sudden dryness, making it impossible to swallow. The blush, this time, was not a gentle flush but a furious burn that spread from my cheeks to the very tips of my ears. I averted my gaze, pretending to be deeply fascinated by a scuff mark on the table, anything to escape the magnetic pull of her eyes. My mind raced, trying to find a safe, neutral response, but all I could manage was a clumsy, inarticulate sound. The compliment, coming from her, delivered with such a gaze, felt less like praise and more like a whispered invitation, a dangerous, thrilling challenge to the carefully constructed walls around my heart. In that moment, suspended in the smoky intimacy of the jazz club, I knew, with a certainty that both terrified and exhilarated me, that something fundamental had shifted between us. The comfortable boundaries of friendship were blurring, dissolving into something potent and entirely new. From that night at the jazz club, my world shifted. Every interaction with Ruth was now charged with a potent, almost dizzying energy. The comfortable, platonic familiarity had evaporated, replaced by a constant, humming awareness of her presence, her movements, her every glance. My senses felt heightened, hyper-aware. I noticed the delicate curve of her upper lip when she smiled, the way her hair caught the light when she tilted her head, the subtle sway of her hips as she walked away from me. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing a world of detail I had previously, perhaps willfully, ignored. My inner monologue, usually a placid stream of observations, had transformed into a relentless torrent of questions and self-doubt. Does she know? Does she feel it too? What is this feeling? The blush that had once been a mere embarrassment now felt like a permanent fixture on my cheeks, ignited by the slightest brush of her hand, the softest inflection in her voice. Ruth, with an uncanny intuition, seemed to sense the change in me. Her approach became bolder, though always framed with an innocent, almost teasing, facade. "Come over, Virginia," she'd text. "I just found this incredible new album, and I need your discerning ear." Or, "I'm making a huge batch of pasta tonight, far too much for just one person. Stay for dinner." Each invitation, seemingly casual, felt like a deliberate step, pulling me deeper into her orbit. And I, utterly incapable of resisting, found myself saying yes, always yes, drawn in by an irresistible, magnetic pull. One particular evening stands out, etched vividly in my memory. I had gone to her apartment after a long day, ostensibly to help her choose a color palette for a new design project. Her apartment was a reflection of her, vibrant, eclectic, filled with art and books and the warm scent of jasmine and old paper. The light was soft, diffused by sheer curtains, casting a golden glow over everything. We were seated on her plush, oversized sofa, surrounded by swatches of fabric and color chips. After a while, the design talk faded, replaced by comfortable silence as we both sipped our tea. Ruth reached for her phone, a thoughtful expression on her face. "I want to show you something," she murmured, her voice a low, warm hum. She scrolled through her music library, then a slow, soulful melody began to fill the room, a bluesy tune with a pulsing bass line and a voice that dripped with longing. She put her phone down on the coffee table, leaning back against the cushions. Her hazel eyes met mine, and there was a knowing, half-smile playing on her lips, a glint of something mischievous, something provocative. "This song," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "it always makes me want to move." Her gaze, which had been holding mine, slowly, deliberately dropped, tracing a molten path from my eyes, down my nose, over my flushed cheeks, and finally, settling on my mouth for a beat that felt like an eternity. My heart, already hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs, lurched. The air, already thick with the sultry music and the warm, jasmine scent, suddenly crackled with an electric charge that made every nerve ending tingle. My breath caught in my throat, a sudden dryness, making it impossible to swallow. I could feel the blush, a furious inferno, consuming my entire face, crawling down my neck. I couldn't look away, utterly mesmerized by her gaze, by the unspoken invitation in her eyes. It was a silent challenge, a daring question that demanded an answer, yet had no words. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion, fear, and a terrifying, exhilarating anticipation. This was it. This was the precipice. And I, who had always meticulously avoided edges, found myself standing there, trembling, strangely eager for the push. The music swelled, a lament, a yearning, mirroring the chaotic symphony unfolding within my own chest. The music enveloped us, a smoky, sensuous embrace that seemed to thicken the air around us. Ruth's gaze, still fixed on my lips, felt like a physical touch, a warm pressure that both terrified and thrilled me. My entire body felt strangely heavy, yet simultaneously light, suspended in a moment that stretched endlessly. The silence between us, punctuated only by the mournful sax and the thrumming bass, was a potent language, speaking volumes without a single word. She slowly, almost imperceptibly, shifted closer on the sofa. Her thigh brushed against mine, a contact that sent a jolt of raw electricity through me, making every hair on my arms stand on end. I sucked in a sharp, shallow breath, acutely aware of the warmth emanating from her, the delicate scent of jasmine and her own unique fragrance, now intoxicatingly close. Ruth's hand so casually, so deliberately reached out. Her fingers, long and elegant, brushed against my arm, a feather-light touch that sent shivers chasing down my spine. It was a calculated move, I realized, a soft, insistent probing, testing the boundaries of my resistance. My mind screamed for me to pull away, to maintain the fragile distance I had always relied upon. But my body, betraying me entirely, remained rooted to the spot, tingling with an unfamiliar anticipation. "You're so quiet tonight, Virginia," Ruth whispered, her voice a low, husky caress that seemed to vibrate directly through my chest. Her eyes, dark and mesmerizing in the soft lamplight, locked onto mine, holding me captive. The question was not about my silence, I knew. It was about everything else. My breath hitched. I could feel the furious beat of my heart, a frantic drum against my ribs. My throat was dry, my tongue heavy. I had no words, no witty retort, no polite deflection. All I could manage was a small, shaky exhale. Then, her gaze, which had been holding mine, slowly, languidly, dropped to my lips again. It lingered there, a silent, intense invitation. My vision narrowed, focusing solely on her mouth, the soft curve of her lower lip. My own lips felt strangely swollen, tingling with an almost unbearable awareness. And then, very slowly, very deliberately, she closed the distance between us. Her lips were soft, warm, a gentle inquiry at first. It was a hesitant brush, a tentative exploration. I froze, my mind a blank canvas of shock and a strange, bewildering surrender. My body, once so rigid and guarded, felt impossibly pliant, a silent testament to the raw, visceral pull she held over me. But then, as if sensing my hesitant acceptance, the kiss deepened. Her mouth softened against mine, a delicate pressure that began to unravel something deep inside me. A low, soft moan escaped my throat, surprising even myself. My fingers, as if possessed by an instinct I didn't know I had, curled into the soft fabric of her sweater, clutching on. And then, impossibly, I found myself responding. It wasn't graceful, or practiced, or even fully intentional. It was clumsy, hesitant, a clumsy echo of her experienced tenderness. But I leaned in, my mouth parting slightly, inviting her deeper. A strange, unfamiliar heat blossomed within me, spreading rapidly through my veins, consuming every inch of my being. It was a warmth I had never felt, a fire that both startled and exhilarated me. The kiss became a torrent, a desperate, eager dance of lips and tongues. My hands, once clutching her sweater, now found their way to her dark, soft hair, tangling in the curls at the nape of her neck. Her arms wrapped around my waist, pulling me closer until there was no space left between us, only the intoxicating press of our bodies. Soft murmurs, indistinct and breathless, mingled with the lingering jazz music, a chaotic symphony of burgeoning passion. The morning light, soft and diffused through Ruth's sheer curtains, felt like a gentle awakening. I stirred, slowly becoming aware of the unfamiliar warmth beside me, the subtle scent of jasmine and her skin. My eyes fluttered open to find myself tucked against Ruth, her arm draped loosely over my waist, her breath soft and even against my hair. Her dark curls were a delightful mess against the pillow. A wave of bewildering emotions washed over me, a mix of shock, a lingering thrill, and a profound, unfamiliar sense of peace. Last night had been a blur of raw sensation, a wild, uninhibited exploration that had shattered every expectation I had of myself. My carefully constructed solitude, my practiced attachment, had simply dissolved under Ruth's insistent, intoxicating touch. I gently shifted, turning my head to look at her. Her eyes were still closed, long lashes fanned out against her cheek. She looked so serene, so unguarded. A small smile played on my lips, a genuine, unbidden expression of tenderness. My fingers, almost on their own accord, reached out to gently brush a stray curl from her forehead. Her eyes slowly opened, blinking sleepily. When they met mine, they held a soft, knowing warmth, devoid of surprise or regret. A faint smile touched her lips. "Morning, Virginia," she murmured, her voice still husky with sleep. She tightened her arm around me, pulling me a little closer. My face, of course, flushed instantly. The familiar blush, but this time it was different. Less embarrassment, more a shy, exhilarating warmth. "Morning," I whispered back, my voice barely audible. We lay there for a long moment, simply existing in the quiet intimacy of the space. The silence, once a source of comfort in my solitary life, now felt like a shared canvas, painted with unspoken feelings. There was a tenderness in Ruth's touch, a silent acknowledgement of the seismic shift that had occurred between us. It was a language of glances, of gentle caresses, speaking volumes without a single word. Slowly, we disentangled ourselves, moving with a quiet grace that reflected the new intimacy between us. Ruth made coffee, the rich aroma filling the apartment, adding another layer to the sensory tapestry of the morning. We sat across from each other at her small kitchen table, mugs cradled in our hands, the comfortable silence stretching between us once more. Then Ruth spoke, her voice soft but steady. "Virginia," she began, her hazel eyes meeting mine. "About last night." My heart gave a nervous flutter. This was it. The conversation I dreaded, the one that required me to articulate feelings I barely understood myself. I braced for an apology, a retraction, a move back to the safety of platonic friendship. "It was incredible," she finished, her smile gentle, reassuring. "And I don't regret a single moment." A profound sense of relief, so strong it almost made me weak, washed over me. I looked down at my coffee, then back up at her, a tentative smile gracing my lips. "Me neither," I admitted, the words feeling fragile, yet true. Then, slowly, painstakingly, I began to talk. My voice was hesitant at first, punctuated by long pauses, but Ruth listened with unwavering patience, her presence a steady anchor. I spoke about the restlessness that had always driven me, the subconscious need to escape, to be alone. I hinted at old wounds, unspoken anxieties that had made me guard my heart so fiercely, made me fear vulnerability. It wasn't a full confession, not yet, but it was a beginning, a hesitant offering of the deepest parts of myself. Ruth didn't interrupt, didn't offer facile solutions. She simply listened, her eyes warm and understanding. When I finished, her hand reached across the table, covering mine, her touch grounding and comforting. "Thank you for telling me, Virginia," she said softly. "It takes a lot of courage to open up like that." Her quiet strength, her profound empathy, felt like a balm to my old, tender wounds. Our relationship, already unexpectedly deep, began to transform further, moving beyond physical attraction into a profound emotional connection. Virginia, the quiet observer, found herself learning to navigate the unfamiliar landscape of intimacy, both physical and emotional. Ruth, in turn, found a deep solace and an unexpected healing in Virginia's quiet strength and profound vulnerability. The world outside, once a place I navigated alone, now felt vibrant and full of shared possibilities. We revisited our favorite spots, but now, with a shared history, our hands often intertwined, a silent testament to our bond. We discovered new corners of the city, each place imbued with the warmth of our burgeoning love. The journey was just beginning, and I, Virginia, once a silent observer, now understood that the truest adventures were not found in solitary travel, but in the terrifying, exhilarating act of opening my heart. I was finally, truly ready to bloom.